I first became aware of S.P. Dinsmoor and Ed Root 50 years ago while reading a 1968 issue of Art in America. In that magazine was a photo essay which was entitled "The Grassroots Artists." These untrained artists are also referred to as primitive or folk or naive artists. I prefer the more contemporary term, visionary artists. S.P. and Ed were among the 16 artists presented as grassroots artists in that Art in America article. Their unique view of the world, their vision, is expressed through their art. Strangely enough, the primary material, the medium, for both S.P. and Ed is cement. Wisconsin and Kansas, two states I spent a great deal of my early life in, are disproportionately represented in that Art in America article. Of the 16 artists, 6 are from Kansas and 4 from Wisconsin. The Dickeyville Grotto in Wisconsin, also featured in the Art in America article, is not far from where I grew up. As I remember it, while in grade school, it seemed like we took an annual field trip to the grotto. It was the one cultural experience available to those of us who grew up in rural southwestern Wisconsin. S.P. and Ed both lived in Lucas, Kansas, not far from where I had my first college teaching job in Hayes, Kansas. I'm not sure what this means for S.P., Ed, and me. I'm just saying that this is part of our connection. I find all of this very curious. I first visited Lucas, Kansas after I read the Art in America article in 1968. I went there with my family and my college roommate, Doug Vogel, who had come with his family to visit mine in western Kansas. We had all gone to college together in Wisconsin. Once again, the Kansas-Wisconsin connection. After grad school and separation by half the continent, fate had brought us close enough to each other that our families could visit a couple of times a year. This visit, Doug and I would make final plans for a set design he was doing for a play I was directing. Our reward for doing this work was a side trip to visit S.P. Dinsmoor's Garden of Eden. A special bonus was to try to find Ed Root's cement art. So on a beautiful spring day, we all piled into Doug's van, Midwestern style, men in front, wives in the middle, and kids in the back. With packed car and lunch, off we headed to Lucas. Lucas is in north central Kansas, surrounded by long rolling hills and a fair number of trees for Kansas. The town, or is it a village, is within 40 miles of the geographic center of the lower 48 states. It's a small town, even now in 2016, only a population of around 450 people, and is surrounded by even smaller towns. Here again, a somewhat odd coincidence. I grew up in Wisconsin, in a small town of 450 people, surrounded by smaller towns. Lucas is in the heart of post-rock country, which means limestone is a major building material. Buildings are built of limestone, as are fence posts, as is S.P. Dinsmoor's limestone log cabin house in the Garden of Eden. Not far away in La Crosse, Kansas, just south of Hayes, is a limestone museum and a barbed wire museum. The people that S.P. Dinsmoor and Ed Root lived among thought materials were important, so now there are small museums to celebrate those materials. In fact, in S.P.'s log cabin home, there's a collection of barbed wire on display. But I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. On that day, we found the Garden of Eden, which was easy to find because of all the signs. The Lucas townfolk are proud of their folk art landmark, which puts them on the map. This separates them from other towns in Kansas. Other towns also try. Cawker City has the world's largest ball of twine. But Lucas has the Garden of Eden.
This is my sign, Garden of Eden. I heard many say, "What is this?" So I put up the sign. S.P. Dinsmoor.
West Side is all biblical, taken from the Old Testament, the books of Moses. You'll see Adam and Eve, 7 foot tall. Eve is a hippie one. The grape arbor is made of 2 giant snakes. Adam is killing one with his heel. While he's doing that, the other one gave Eve the apple. That's where all the trouble started, that apple. He built a pair of storks. He says, we have to have the storks. They bring the kids. They have a baby under each wing up there. One wing's got a hole in it where the baby fell out. He's caught up on a limb. On further to the north, way up high, we have Cain and Abel, their brothers. They're offering their sacrifices to the Lord. Cain was the tiller of the soil, so he's offering a pumpkin. It's rotten. Cain's trying to hide the hole with his foot so the Lord won't see it.
The devil was in the Garden of Eden. He was always after the kids. S.P.
Abel was a shepherd. He's offering a nice young buck. The Lord liked his mutton, but not the rotten pumpkin. So he put a crown above Abel, way up high, above his head. That made Cain so mad he killed him. On the next tree, you see Abel laying there bleeding to death after Cain brained him with a hoe. Abel's wife and shepherd dog just discovered him, and the angel's coming down to pick up his spirit. In the last tree on the corner, you see Cain and his wife fleeing to the land of Nod. They're scared. The Lord's after them. They just committed the first murder in the Bible. Now he has 2 girls out there. One swinging and one catching a bird. He says you never see boys, but what girls aren't hanging around. So he put 2 of them up.
Now this is modern civilization as I see it. If it is not right, I am to blame. But if the Garden of Eden is not right, Moses is to blame. He wrote it up, and I built it. S.P.
You have a lady after a soldier. Dinsmoor said he knows that's right because he was a soldier. And the soldier's after the Indian after the dog. Fox after the bird, bird's after a worm on a leaf. That's survival of the fittest, any thing you want to call it. I call it a sequence. This is labor crucified by the big shots. Labor has been crucified for years and years. The bankers and lawyers always were a little shady. Medicare came in, the doctors got in with both feet. Cadillacs and fly airplanes on your money if you send them any. Never miss voting. You have power in your vote, use it. That's what he's trying to tell you. This is a mausoleum where Dinsmoor is buried. It's 40 feet high. That's a pile of rock. Take a look at it. He has his cement angel at the top. That angel's been up there 65 years through Kansas weather, and the wings aren't over an inch thick. Pretty good construction.
When I quit breathing, my body will be embalmed and placed in this coffin. I promise everyone that comes to see me, they can look through the plate glass and see my face. That if I see them dropping $1 in the hands of the flunky, and I see the dollar, I will give them a smile. S.P. Dinsmoor.
But for us on that day, we were going after something harder to find, and that was Ed Root's cement art.
S.P. Dinsmoor started in 1907, creating here in Lucas. When he died in 1931, there was a little small period where no environment was going on, but then you had Ed Root. Ed Root lived to be 94. And we think it's a combination of physically being active in your retirement years and mentally having that thing to challenge you every day. And he started in 1940, he died in 1960. Why would you keep doing it if you weren't having fun?
It took us a while to find someone in town who knew where he had lived. When we finally found the farmhouse, it seemed abandoned. There were fragments of Ed Root's art lying in the grass. In a shed, next to the empty house, were small glass jars with screw-on caps. Jars that originally held pickles or mustard or jam. Inside those jars were small black and white photos and little found objects, feathers, stones, shards of broken plates, various things that perhaps related to the person in the photos. None of these jars exist today. In fact, no one seems to know they existed at all. But here, in one of his cement pieces, is a jar. In 2015, I drove this same route to Ed's farm. And came to this, Lake Wilson.
Ed Root's farm would be at the bottom of the lake. And we have heard tales that he was out with his shotgun saying, no, this isn't going to happen to me. But it did happen. And eventually, a lot of these, he had a brother that was just closer to Lucas. And so a lot of those got moved there. At least the Kansas Grassroots Art Association managed to work with the family to save what we're seeing primarily here at the Art Center. He outlived his wife in retirement years. And so if you look at his pieces, and we've had grandkids confirm this, that he broke every dish, platter, gravy boat, carnival glass, because the wife was not there to guard it anymore. So there's the Root monogram in some of them, you know. And it's just pretty terrific, you know, nobody said no to him at that point.
SP was a showman. He wanted to be known, to be heard, to have a legacy. He is, after all, buried in a mausoleum on the grounds of the Garden of Eden, with a glass over his mummified face. Ed Root, on the other hand, just seemed to do his art mostly for himself. Certainly at the time I stumbled on his work on the grounds of that old farmhouse, no one seemed to think there was anything worth saving. SP and Ed both taught me things that day, and even now as I reflect back on their art. Art exists if someone says what they're doing is art. SP shouted it loud and clear. Ed knew he was doing something special. Certainly he was not farming when he made his beautiful objects. When Ed was alive, he put the cement art out for all to see as they drove by his house on that somewhat busy country road. The bottles were more private, perhaps even mystical. Seeing the art of both of these men made me think about and do art in a different way. In 1968, I'd been doing still photography for years. After that first trip to Lucas, I created 3 new pieces that were clearly influenced by seeing the art of SP and Ed. These new works of mine combined photographs and wood. I called them photo constructions. 2 still exist. One, like the glass jars of Ed Root, has disappeared. The other 2 I still have, Law and Order and God Bless America. The art you have seen during my narration for this video is work I've done over the last 50 years. I am not a visionary artist. In fact, I'm formally trained as a production designer, theater director, and filmmaker. But I would never have done any of my artwork or set designs for theater and film without the influence of SP and Ed. I'm not comparing the level of my work to theirs. I'm simply pointing out the connection, their influence. I owe a great deal of my sense of art to that day when I first saw the work of two special visionary artists, SP Dinsmoor and Ed Root.